The most dangerous moment in a man's financial life isn't when he's broke. It's the exact moment he realizes his money no longer requires his presence to multiply. You're sitting in an airport lounge in Denver at 11:15 on a Tuesday morning. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass, a Boeing 737 is taxiing toward the runway. Around you, men in tailored navy blazers are aggressively typing on laptops, barking orders into wireless earbuds, and checking their watches every 4 minutes like they're running out of air. You're wearing a plain black crewneck sweater, dark jeans, and leather sneakers with no visible logos. You have an unread paperback lying flat on the marble coffee table in front of you.
Your phone, sitting next to your passport screen, lights up with a silent banner notification from your Fidelity account. Dividend deposit, $16,450, Chevron Corp. And Broadcom Inc. You don't react. You don't jump up and call anyone. You just glance at the numbers, flip the phone back face down, and take a slow drink of sparkling water. While the guy 2 chairs over from you is furiously renegotiating a software contract to hit his quarterly sales quota, $16,000 just quietly settled into your cash sweep account. It arrived because thousands of gas stations processed payments yesterday, and millions of microchips processed data last night. You didn't manage a single employee, you didn't approve a single expense report, you just owned the underlying machinery. And the strangest part of it all, nobody in this lounge has any idea. The road to dividend independence doesn't start with a $1 million portfolio. It starts with an uncomfortable realization about how human income actually works. 10 years ago, you were 25, sitting in a windowless interior office on the 14th floor of an asset management firm in Chicago. You were pulling down $58,000 a year as a junior financial analyst, spending 11 hours a day updating pitch decks for senior partners who didn't know your last name.
You had a coworker named Julian. Julian was 27, drove a leased Audi S4, wore a $4,000 watch he bought on an installment plan, and spent every Friday night at rooftop bars trying to look like he'd already arrived. "Why do you bring a turkey sandwich from home every day?" Julian asked you one afternoon, leaning against your cubicle partition. "Man, we work in finance. Live a little." "I like turkey," you said, without looking up from your screen. What you didn't tell Julian was that you were studying the core law of wealth creation, the shift from human capital to asset capital. Most people spend their entire lives relying 100% on human capital, their physical time, energy, and presence. The moment they stop working, their income instantly drops to zero. Real financial literacy isn't about saving money for the sake of hoarding. It's about systematically converting your temporary human capital into permanent asset capital, assets that generate yield without your physical presence. You automated your bank account to sweep $1,400 out of your salary every single payday into a taxable brokerage portfolio. You weren't buying lottery ticket tech options or chasing crypto pumps. You were buying broad dividend appreciation funds and cash-generative monopolies, consumer staples, healthcare conglomerates, and energy infrastructure. Your first financial literacy lesson in the real world arrived 6 months later. It was a cold Tuesday in November. You opened your brokerage app while standing in line at a salad place downtown. There it was, a dividend credit from Johnson & Johnson for $12.40. $12.40. Julian would have scoffed at it. It couldn't even pay for the salad you were standing in line to order. But as you stood on the wet Chicago pavement, holding your phone, that $12 felt like a tear in the fabric of the universe. Because for the first time in your life, you saw the mechanics in action. You had earned $12.40 without trading 30 minutes of your labor. You were no longer just a W-2 worker selling hours. You were a micro-owner claiming yield. Crossing the first major milestone, $500 a month in dividend yield, teaches you the second lesson, the expense baseline ratio.
To generate $500 every 30 days in safe, qualified dividends at a conservative 3.5% portfolio yield, you need roughly $170,000 in liquid capital. Think about the sheer discipline required to reach that point. You have to save $170,000 of post-tax money. In America, after federal taxes, state taxes, rent, food, and health insurance, saving $170,000 feels like trying to fill a swimming pool with a drinking straw.
It takes years of quiet, invisible sacrifice. You watch your peers buy bigger apartments, upgrade their wardrobes, and take week-long trips to Miami. Meanwhile, your portfolio balance climbs agonizingly slowly. $20,000, $50,000, $100,000. At $100,000, your annual dividend income is only $3,500. It feels insignificant relative to the mountain of effort you put in. You start to wonder if the math is a fantasy. Then comes year 5. You hit $172,000 in total portfolio value. Total annual dividend yield, $6,020. Average monthly passive cash flow, $501. You sat at your kitchen table one Sunday evening, paying your bills online. You applied your first financial literacy framework, mapping dividend yield directly against fixed baseline overhead.
Electric bill, $110. Internet, $75. Car insurance, $140. Cell phone, $65. Groceries, $110. Total basic survival overhead, $500. You stopped typing. You looked at your dividend projection statement. Your portfolio had officially crossed your core survival baseline. Even if you were fired Monday morning, even if the corporate world collapsed, your light switches would stay on, your fridge would stay cold, and your phone would keep working without you lifting a finger. You didn't feel rich, but you felt something much rarer. You felt safe. The floor beneath your life had just been reinforced with steel.
The shift from $500 a month to $5,000 a month reveals the third critical lesson: the mechanics of automated drip compounding. At $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year in dividend yield, you need a portfolio floating around $1.7 million. By this stage, you aren't just pushing your own savings uphill anymore. The portfolio itself begins doing the heavy lifting through DRIP, dividend reinvestment plans. Here is how DRIP literacy actually works. When a company pays you a dividend, your brokerage automatically uses that cash to buy fractional shares of the company at market price without charging transaction fees. In quarter 1, you own 1,000 shares paying $1 each, $1,000. That $1,000 automatically buys 20 new shares. In quarter 2, you now own 1,020 shares, paying you $1,020, which buys even more shares.
Your capital begins breeding its own capital on autopilot. When you reach $5,000 a month, something fascinating happens to your professional career. Don't care money mechanics. You were sitting in an emergency quarterly review meeting at your firm during year 8. The managing director was pacing back and forth at the head of the conference table, slamming his notebook down, threatening to revoke annual bonuses if the team didn't work through the upcoming holiday weekend. 10 years earlier, that speech would have given you a cold sweat. You would have nodded along, terrified of losing your health insurance or falling behind on rent. Instead, you sat near the window, hands loosely folded, watching him yell. You felt completely detached, like you were observing a theater performance through thick glass. You knew that in 72 hours, $15,000 in quarterly dividend payments from AbbVie, PepsiCo, and Prologis were dropping into your account. You didn't need the bonus. You didn't need the managing director's approval. You didn't even need the job. 2 weeks later, you turned in your 3-week notice. You didn't make a scene. You didn't write a dramatic resignation email. You just handed over your key card, packed your desk into a single cardboard box, and walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight. Julian was still there, working 60-hour weeks to pay off a mortgage on a house he barely saw, and lease payments on a car he only drove in traffic. Now, consider the top tier, $50,000 a month in portfolio yield, $600,000 a year in passive cash flow.
To sustain $600,000 a year without taking reckless yield trap risks requires an asset base between $14 million and $16 million. At this level, you learn the most powerful financial literacy lesson of all: tax arbitrage and capital preservation. At $50,000 a month, your entire operational focus shifts from making money to protecting it from inflation and tax drag. You hire Carol, a quiet, sharp CPA who operates out of an unpretentious brick office building in suburban Illinois. Carol breaks down the tax code literacy that separates W-2 workers from asset owners over a desk cleared of everything except 2 pristine manila folders. W-2 income is earned income, Carol explains, tapping her pen on a tax comparison chart. It gets hit with federal income tax up to 37%, plus Medicare and Social Security payroll taxes. But qualified dividends from U.S. corporations held for more than 60 days are classified as long-term capital assets. Meaning, you ask? Meaning federal tax brackets on qualified yield max out at 20%, Carol says softly. If you earned $600,000 a year as a corporate C-suite executive, you'd hand over nearly $240,000 in combined taxes. On a $600,000 qualified dividend portfolio, with our municipal bond asset location setup, your effective federal drag is under 18%. You aren't just making money, you're keeping vastly more of it, because the tax code in almost every developed nation is explicitly written to favor capital owners over time traders. Yet, here is the strange, invisible friction of high-yield living that nobody teaches you: society's systemic confusion around non-W-2 wealth. The world is designed exclusively for people with traditional employment. It struggles to categorize anyone who exists outside that box. Last year, you applied for a simple residential mortgage to buy a quiet stone cottage on 4 acres in Wisconsin. You walked into a regional bank branch wearing a plain jacket and jeans, holding a portfolio summary statement. The loan officer, a young guy named Kevin wearing a crisp blue shirt, looked over your application.
"Okay, looks good," Kevin said, clicking his mouse. "I just need your last 3 pay stubs and a W-2 from your current employer." "I don't have a W-2, you said gently. "I live on portfolio yield." Kevin stopped clicking. He looked up, blinked twice, and looked back at his screen. "Right, but who is your employer? What company issues your salary?" "Hundreds of companies," you said. "Whenever someone buys a can of soda or pays an electric bill, a tiny fraction flows to my custody account."
Kevin spent 45 minutes on the phone with his underwriting department. The underwriters, baffled by an applicant with 0 W-2 wages but millions in blue-chip liquid assets, initially flagged the application as high risk. You ended up having to wire cash to buy the property outright because corporate mortgage algorithms literally cannot process a man who owns the machine instead of working inside it. And then there's the personal isolation. You quickly learn a rule of social financial literacy: never announce your liquidity. If you tell people you worked 80 hours a week to earn $600,000, they congratulate you. They understand exhaustion. If you tell them you earned $600,000 while traveling, reading books, and sleeping 9 hours a night, resentment sets in. They don't see 10 years of disciplined capital conversion. They see unfair privilege. So you adopt a camouflage strategy. Your car is a clean, 7-year-old Subaru Outback with a small scratch on the rear bumper. When your neighbors ask what you do for a living while you're out watering your lawn at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, you tell them you do back-office risk analysis for an out-of-state logistics firm. They nod, satisfied, and move on. Last month, you were in a grocery store on a rainy afternoon, standing in the dairy aisle. You were looking at 2 tubs of butter.
one standard brand for $3.29, and an imported European cultured butter for $4.89. You stood there for 30 seconds, weighing whether the extra $1.60 was worth it for weekend baking. While you were holding the 2 tubs of butter, your phone vibrated in your jacket pocket. You pulled it out. An automated text alert from your brokerage account. Dividend credit, $22,410, ExxonMobil and Pfizer Inc. You looked at the text screen. You looked at the butter. You placed the $4.89 European butter into your basket, walked to the self-checkout, and stepped out into the quiet rain. You drove home to your stone cottage, put the groceries away, and made a simple meal on your stove. You sat on your covered porch, watching the rain hit the pine trees, drinking a warm cup of black tea while the evening light faded into deep blue. Nobody called to throw a party. Nobody cheered. The world outside kept grinding. People sitting in bumper-to-bumper evening traffic, stressing over performance reviews, worrying about credit card statements, trading the best years of their lives for a paycheck that barely keeps up with inflation. You took a slow sip of tea and felt the cool breeze move through the trees. $500 a month buys your survival bills. $5,000 a month buys your career freedom. $50,000 a month removes you completely from the economic arena. In the end, financial literacy wasn't about buying fancy cars or showing off at dinner tables. It was about understanding how to systematically convert your labor into capital until your capital buys the one resource that no amount of status can ever replenish: absolute ownership over every single second of your day. Unremarkable, quiet, inconveniently real.